18,000 horsemen come down a single mountain at once, lances lowered, armor flashing, great feathered wings rising from their backs. It is often called the largest cavalry charge in all of history. Below them waits the largest army the Ottoman Empire had ever led into Europe. Behind the riders, a city has been dying for 2 months. In the next 3 hours, the fate of a continent will turn on this slope. This is the siege that was meant to open the road to the heart of Europe. And this is how it became the day the Ottoman tide broke and never rose so far again. This is exactly how it happened. For over a century, one city had stood between the Ottoman Empire and the rich heartland of Christian Europe, Vienna. It guarded the great river Danube and the roads west into the German lands. This was not the first time. 150 years earlier, the Ottomans under Suleiman the Magnificent had besieged Vienna once before and been turned back at its walls. Now they were coming again, stronger than ever. The pretext was a revolt in Hungary against Habsburg rule. The Ottomans backed the rebels, and the Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa Pasha, saw his chance. Not just to march into Hungary, but all the way to Vienna itself. In the Ottoman court, they believed the moment had come. The empire stretched from Arabia to the gates of Hungary. Taking Vienna would crack Europe open. But the Sultan, Mehmed the Fourth, would not lead the campaign himself. Instead, he handed his Grand Vizier the sacred banner of the Prophet and command of an army the like of which Europe had not seen in generations. Then Kara Mustafa marched north toward the greatest prize of his life. How large was that army? Historians still argue. An order of battle found later in Kara Mustafa's own tent listed 170,000 men. Many estimates land near 150,000. Older accounts claimed far more. Whatever the true figure, it was one of the mightiest hosts the Ottomans ever gathered. Janissaries in tall white caps, the Sultan's elite infantry, Sipahi horsemen in scale armor, thousands of miners and gunners, and 40,000 Tatar riders ranging ahead. As the storm rolled toward Vienna, the Holy Roman Emperor, Leopold, did not stay to meet it. He fled west to Passau, and some 60,000 terrified citizens streamed out of the city with him. Behind them, they left a garrison of barely 15,000 soldiers and a few thousand armed townsmen to hold the most important city in Central Europe against perhaps 150,000. The man given that impossible task was Count Ernst von Starhemberg. Kara Mustafa sent the customary demand: surrender and be spared. Starhemberg had just learned what that promise was worth. At a nearby town, Perchtoldsdorf, the people had surrendered on those same terms and been killed anyway. So Starhemberg refused. He would not open the gates. Inside the walls, the city braced for the largest siege it had ever known and prayed that somewhere, someone was coming. On the 14th of July, the siege began. But Kara Mustafa did not do the obvious thing. He did not hurl his enormous army at the walls in one overwhelming assault. Some believe he wanted Vienna whole, with all its riches intact, and that an all-out storm would have handed the plunder to his soldiers. So instead of a hammer blow, he chose a slower, surer method. He would dig his way in. Around the doomed city rose a second city of canvas. Tens of thousands of tents, horse lines and camel trains, and at its heart the Grand Vizier's own pavilion, vast and opulent, as if he already ruled the place. His men carved long zigzag trenches across the open ground, creeping closer week by week. Great batteries of cannon hammered the bastions. But the real battle would be fought underground. Ottoman miners tunneled beneath the walls, packing the caverns with black powder to blow the bastions apart from below. Inside, the defenders pressed their ears to the earth for the sound of digging and tunneled down to meet them. It became a hidden war beneath the city. Mines and countermines, charges blown in the dark, men fighting with picks in tunnels no wider than a coffin, while above them the great guns never stopped. Above ground, the city was slowly starving. Food ran out, then dysentery came and killed as surely as any cannon. Exhaustion grew so total that Starhemberg ordered any sentry found asleep to be shot. Week after week, the Ottoman mines chewed into the defenses. Bastions cracked and slumped. Gaps opened in the walls wide enough to march through, and each night the garrison filled those gaps with their own bodies. But the garrison did not only defend. Night after night they crept out into the enemy trenches to kill the miners and collapse the tunnels, led by the engineer who had turned the old walls into a death trap. By early September it was nearly over. The Ottomans stormed a key outwork before the walls and stood almost inside the city. Priests and cobblers took up pikes. The last defenders prepared to fight in the streets. And here is the cruel truth of the siege. Kara Mustafa still had the men to storm Vienna and take it. What he no longer had was time. His careful, patient method had spent the one thing he could not replace. For 2 months, the digging and the disease had bought the defenders something precious: days. And far to the north, those same days had given a king just enough time to gather an army and march. His name was John the Third Sobieski, King of Poland. He had beaten Ottoman armies before, and all of Christian Europe now looked to him. The Pope himself had helped fund a holy league to save the city. And Sobieski did not come alone. He joined forces with the Imperial army under Charles of Lorraine, and contingents from Saxony, Bavaria, and Baden. Some 70 to 80,000 men, marching to relieve a city they might already be too late to save. The way was not yet clear. In August, the Imperial commander Charles of Lorraine had already turned back a rebel Hungarian army north of the city, clearing the last threat to the relief before it could gather. They crossed the Danube at Tulln, and then faced the last barrier. The Vienna woods, steep, wooded hills. The Ottomans believed no army could bring guns and cavalry across in time. The Ottomans had counted on their Tatar horsemen to guard those hills and stop any relief. But the Tatar Khan, for reasons still argued over, let the Christian army cross the river and climb the heights unopposed. So they climbed, dragging cannon up the slopes by rope, hauling horses through the trees. The relief army reached the crest of the heights called the Kahlenberg, and looked down on the whole vast Ottoman camp below. On the night before the battle, the defenders in the city saw fires bloom on the mountain crest above them. It was the signal they had prayed for. They were not alone. Rescue had come, but the two armies had to strike as one. So a merchant named Kulchiki, fluent in Turkish, slipped in disguise straight through the sprawling Ottoman camp and back, carrying word between the city and the king on the mountain. At 4 in the morning on the 12th of September, the battle began. But the Ottomans struck first, lunging up the wooded slopes to shatter the relief army before it could fully form. Now the fighting turns savage. Charles of Lorraine and his German troops push down the left, taking the village's one garden wall at a time. All morning the two sides tear at each other across the vineyards. Even now, Kara Mustafa will not let go of the city. As the relief army bears down on him, he keeps his best troops digging at the walls, still trying to break into Vienna. He is fighting 2 battles at once. Beneath the walls, his miners set their last great charge, 10 mines packed with powder to blow Vienna open at last. But the defenders found the tunnels in time and cut the fuses in the dark. By late afternoon, the Ottoman army was exhausted and caught between the city and the hills. On the high ground to the west, the Polish cavalry gathered in the trees, and Sobieski looked down the long slope and saw his moment. Before the charge that everyone remembers, one quick thing. If this story is holding you, a like genuinely helps it reach more people who love history. Now, to the moment the whole day had been building toward. These were the winged hussars, the most feared cavalry in Europe. Heavy lancers in steel plate, with tall wooden frames of eagle feathers rising behind their backs, and long lances tipped with fluttering pennants. The wings, it is said, hummed and roared in the wind of a charge and unsettled the enemy's horses. Whatever the truth of that, the sight of them coming was enough to break a man's nerve. First, a mere 120 hussars made a probing charge to test the Ottoman line. They took heavy losses, but they had proved it could be broken. That was all Sobieski needed to know. At 6 in the evening, Sobieski gives the order. 18,000 horsemen start down the mountain, 4 great waves of them, gathering speed. At their head rides the king himself, with 3,000 winged hussars. It is often called the largest cavalry charge in history. It strikes the Ottoman lines like an avalanche of steel, Lances shatter men and horses. The exhausted defenders simply cannot hold. The Ottoman army, worn down by 2 months of siege and a full day of battle, breaks. What began as a fighting retreat becomes a rout. The horsemen drive straight for the heart of the camp, and Kara Mustafa's own tent. Inside Vienna, the garrison flings open its battered gates and pours out to join the attack. In less than 3 hours after the charge, it is over. The siege is broken. The city is saved. Sobieski rode into the abandoned Ottoman camp and found unimaginable riches, tents, treasure, even the Grand Vizier's own banner. That night he wrote to his wife and paraphrased Caesar. "We came, we saw, God conquered." The victory was total, but war is never clean. Thousands had fallen on both sides, and within the city, hunger and disease had already taken nearly half the garrison and countless citizens before rescue ever arrived. For Kara Mustafa, the reckoning was swift. He had lost the greatest army of his career at the gates of a single city. On Christmas Day in Belgrade, the Sultan's men strangled him with a silk cord. Vienna was the high-water mark. For 150 years, the Ottomans had pushed deeper into Europe. After that single afternoon on the Kahlenberg, they would never come so far again. The victory opened a war that ran for 16 more years. Step by step, the Habsburgs took back Hungary. By the peace that ended it, the Ottoman frontier had been pushed far to the south, for good. Historians still debate how close it truly came. But strip away the legend and the core of it remains extraordinary. A starving city held for 2 months, and a king and his winged horsemen came over a mountain at the last hour to save it. The wings were laid down. But the day the winged hussars came down the Kahlenberg is still remembered as the day the tide of an empire turned. If you enjoy the battles that changed the course of history, subscribe and march with us for the next one.